My brother hit my daughter in front of the family over an accidental spill of an expensive bottle, and I was the only one not laughing. I had spent my entire life learning how to stay quiet, how to shrink myself just enough to fit into a family that never really made space for me. Growing up as the middle child, I learned early that attention was a limited resource, and it had already been claimed. My older brother, Daniel, was the family's pride. By the time he was barely a teenager, my parents spoke about his future as if it were already written in stone. He was going to be a doctor, just like it was fate itself. They poured money into his dreams, paid for tutors, prep courses, and endless trips for interviews. When he finally received his white coat, they threw a celebration so extravagant it cost more than my entire college education. I remember standing near the wall at that party, holding a paper cup, watching my mother cry tears of joy as she showed strangers his photos. She kept repeating how special he was, how they always knew. 2 months earlier, I had graduated with honors. She mailed me a card. My younger sister Emily was treated differently but no less generously. She was labeled the creative one, the dreamer. Every new business idea she had was met with excitement and financial support. When her handmade jewelry venture failed, it was framed as growth. When her online boutique collapsed under debt, my parents quietly paid it off, calling it part of her journey. Meanwhile, I chose accounting, stability over passion, and paid my own way through college by working 2 jobs. I slept for hours a night and still graduated at the top of my class. My parents missed my graduation because Emily had a photography exhibit that weekend. 6 people attended, including me. At family dinners, I learned to sit and listen. Conversations never paused when I arrived. One Thanksgiving, I had just been promoted to manager. I waited patiently for a break in Daniel's dramatic story about a surgery to mention it. My mother smiled briefly and said it was nice, then immediately turned back to him. After that, I stopped trying. It was easier to be invisible than disappointed. When I was 28, everything collapsed for my parents. Their small auto parts shop, which they had run for decades, couldn't survive the economy or the competition. They lost the business and their apartment within months. Around the same time, Emily's 3rd business failed, leaving her buried in credit card debt. She called me crying in the middle of the night. Daniel, comfortably settled in his large house with his doctor's salary, told them all to file for bankruptcy and get real jobs. Then he stepped back into his life without another thought. I was the one with savings and a steady paycheck. My parents didn't ask so much as inform me. My mother gave my number to the landlord. My father left a voicemail reminding me that family takes care of family. Emily sent her bank details without explanation. They had decided I would fix it. I started paying my parents' rent every month. I covered Emily's car payment, utilities, groceries when she panicked. The money I had saved for a home disappeared within months. My daughter's college fund stopped growing. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was what good daughters did. I had been raising my daughter, Lily, on my own, since she was an infant. Her father vanished before she was born, and I never asked my family for help. I worked through pregnancy, figured out childcare, built my career step by step. Lily was 6 now, bright and joyful, with my eyes and a laugh that filled rooms. I loved her more fiercely than anything I had ever known. Yet at family gatherings, we barely existed. Daniel would arrive and instantly command the room, spinning stories about saving lives, while my parents watched him like he was a miracle. 3 framed photos of him in his white coat sat on their mantel. There were none of me. When my mother invited us to a family gathering that Sunday, I almost declined. I was exhausted from a brutal week at work and already knew how the day would go. But Lily had been excited to see her cousins, making drawings for them at school, and that old foolish part of me still hoped to be noticed. I agreed. My mother casually asked me to pick up food and drinks on the way, as if it were understood. It always was. Saturday morning, Lily bounced beside me through the grocery store, talking nonstop about her cousins and school. I filled the cart with everything I knew my parents expected: brand name snacks, fruit trays, drinks, all the disposable supplies no one ever thought about. At checkout, I paid without comment, forcing myself not to calculate how much of my life that money represented. Lily insisted on carrying one of the lighter bags, proud and smiling. I told her she was strong, because she was. That evening, I helped her choose her favorite pink dress, already a little too small. I braided her hair carefully, tying pink ribbons at the ends while she sang softly, completely trusting me. She asked if her uncle would be there and complained about his boring stories. I laughed, not knowing how heavy that moment would later feel. Before we left the next day, I looked at myself in the mirror and wondered why I kept doing this to myself, but I went anyway. The apartment was crowded when we arrived. I set the bags down while my mother immediately started opening them. No thank you offered. Lily ran off to play with her cousins. I found a seat and tried to relax. For a brief moment, it felt almost normal. Then Daniel arrived, holding an expensive bottle of imported liquor like a trophy. The room shifted instantly toward him. He placed the bottle carefully on a side table and launched into a dramatic story, and everyone listened. The children were racing through the apartment, laughing and shouting. Lily was in the middle of them, her joy infectious. She turned the corner too fast, tripped near the coffee table, and stumbled into the side table. I saw it happen in a blur. The bottle tipped, paused, and then shattered on the floor with a violent crash. Glass flew everywhere. The room went silent. Lily froze, staring at the mess, her face draining of color. She started to apologize, her voice trembling. Daniel stood up slowly, his face dark with fury, and crossed the room. Before anyone could react, he slapped her. The sound echoed. Lily didn't even move at first. Then she screamed, a raw, terrified sound that cut through me. His handprint bloomed across her cheek as he sneered about the cost of the bottle and insulted both of us. Laughter followed. Nervous, cruel laughter. I heard my sister. I heard my mother. Something inside me broke beyond repair. I told everyone to stop, my voice louder than I had ever heard it. I confronted Daniel, shaking with rage. But no one defended my daughter. Excuses filled the room. Silence where outrage should have been. I lifted Lily into my arms as she sobbed against me and looked at every face that had failed her. I told them exactly what I had done for this family and what they had allowed to happen. Then I walked out. I didn't look back. I buckled Lily into her car seat with trembling hands and drove home, promising her through my tears that no one would ever hurt her like that again. That night changed everything. The drive home felt endless even though it barely took 15 minutes. Every red light stretched into an eternity, every second heavy with the sound of Lily's broken sobs from the back seat. She cried until her voice went hoarse, then fell into a strange, stunned silence that frightened me even more. I kept glancing at her through the rearview mirror, watching her small hand hover near her cheek where the red mark was already beginning to darken. She stared out the window, unmoving, like her world had cracked and she didn't yet know how to respond. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely there. She asked why her uncle hit her, why saying sorry wasn't enough. I reached back to hold her hand while driving, my own tears blurring the road, and told her it wasn't her fault, that accidents happen, that grown-ups are never allowed to hurt children. I promised her safety over and over, even as my chest burned with guilt for not stopping it sooner. At home, I tried everything I could think of to bring her back to herself. I made her favorite hot chocolate with extra chocolate syrup and too many marshmallows, put on the animated movie she loved most, wrapped her in her soft blanket, and held her close on the couch. I whispered reassurance into her hair, told her she was good and kind and loved more than anything in the world. But she barely reacted. She didn't laugh at the scenes she used to quote by heart. She held the mug until it went cold without drinking it. Her body stayed stiff against mine, like she was afraid to relax. That night, getting her to sleep took hours. She startled awake every few minutes to make sure I was still there, her breathing shallow and uneven. When she finally drifted off, I sat beside her bed in the dark, listening to each breath, knowing the damage had already settled deep. The nightmares came exactly as I feared. 3 times that night she woke crying, clutching at me, her body trembling like she was falling. Each time I held her until she slept again, and each time my anger sharpened into something colder and more deliberate. Around 3 in the morning, after she finally fell into a deeper sleep, I walked into the living room and opened my laptop. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the glow of the screen. I logged into my bank account with hands that no longer shook. One by one, I canceled every automatic payment I had set up for my family, the rent transfer to my parents, the credit card payments for Emily, the grocery fund, all of it. I revoked my mother's access to my savings and changed my passwords. Every financial tie I had used to hold them up, I cut cleanly. When I finished, I leaned back and stared at the screen, seeing the numbers clearly for the first time. Tens of thousands of dollars a year. Money that could have gone to Lily's future. Money they had taken without gratitude. Then I opened my messages and found my cousin, the one who had been filming the gathering with his expensive camera. I told him I needed the video, specifically the part where Lily was hit. His hesitation came quickly, followed by excuses about not wanting to get involved. When I insisted, he tried to sell it to me, putting a price on my daughter's pain. The fury I felt was almost blinding, but I needed that footage. I sent the money and waited. When the file finally arrived, I watched it again and again, each viewing worse than the last. The camera had captured everything in horrifying clarity. Lily's laughter, the stumble, the bottle falling, Daniel's face hardening, the slap, the sound of it, the laughter in the background. I saved the file in multiple places, backed it up, and sat in the growing light of dawn with a cup of black coffee I barely tasted by morning. I had made a decision that felt terrifying and inevitable. I took Lily to a child psychologist I had found during my frantic searches the night before. The office was warm and colorful, filled with toys meant to feel safe. Lily stayed pressed against my side, silent. The therapist spoke gently, spent time on the floor with her, letting her play instead of forcing words. After the session, she told me Lily had experienced acute trauma, worsened by the betrayal of family. Therapy would help, but it would take time. I booked multiple appointments immediately, not caring what it cost. That afternoon, while Lily napped restlessly, I edited the video. I blurred her face completely and wrote a description explaining what had happened. My cursor hovered over the post button as doubt tried to claw its way back in. This would destroy Daniel's life. But then I remembered Lily's blank stare in the car, the way she flinched when I touched her hair. I pressed post. The first upload was removed quickly due to policies, exactly as I expected. I edited it again, heavier censoring, and posted it elsewhere. This time it stayed. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Views climbed by the hundreds, then thousands. Parents shared it in local groups, tagging the clinic where Daniel worked. Comments poured in from people horrified that a pediatrician could do this. By the next day, the clinic placed him on administrative leave. Within weeks, he was fired. The medical board opened an investigation, and although his license wasn't fully revoked, the restrictions placed on him made practicing nearly impossible. His carefully built reputation collapsed faster than I had imagined. My phone rang constantly. Messages flooded in from family members accusing me of cruelty, betrayal, exaggeration. I ignored all of them. I focused on Lily, on holding her through nightmares, on sitting with her in therapy, on reminding her, again and again, that she was safe now. I felt empty more than satisfied, but certain. I had stopped protecting people who didn't deserve it. A month later, I finally answered when my mother called. She cried and screamed about eviction, about homelessness, about how I had ruined their lives. I reminded her calmly that they had been behind on rent before I stopped paying, that they had laughed while Lily was hurt. She denied laughing, minimized everything, defended Daniel. I asked her if she cared about Lily at all. She couldn't answer. I told her she had made her choice and hung up. blocking her number along with everyone else who had stood silent that day. The aftermath rippled outward. My parents ended up in a municipal shelter. Emily was forced to get a job for the first time in years. Daniel lost everything he valued. I felt no joy in it, only a deep exhaustion and a strange sense of finality. Lily slowly began to laugh again, though the flinching remained. Therapy helped, but scars don't vanish overnight. I threw myself into work to avoid thinking about the empty space where my family used to be. Until my distraction finally caught up with me, a serious mistake on a major account earned me a formal warning and the harsh realization that I couldn't do this alone anymore. That was when I found a support group through Lily's therapist. Sitting in a circle with strangers who understood trauma and impossible family choices changed something in me. For the first time, no one questioned my decision. They reminded me of the truth I kept forgetting. I had protected my child, and that mattered more than anything else. The support group became the one place where I didn't have to defend myself. We met once a week in a church basement that smelled faintly of old coffee and cleaning solution, folding chairs in a loose circle, chipped mugs, tired faces. The first night I spoke, the words came out broken and tangled, but no one interrupted me. When I finished, a woman across from me reached out and squeezed my hand and told me I had done exactly what a parent was supposed to do. Others nodded. Some cried. Their stories were different in detail but familiar in feeling. Abuse excused. Boundaries punished. Children expected to endure for the sake of family harmony. Sitting there, I felt something inside me loosen for the first time since that Sunday. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't alone. Through one of the cousins who hadn't been at the gathering, bits of information filtered back to me whether I wanted them or not. My parents had missed too many rent payments and were evicted. They ended up in a city-run shelter, sharing a cramped room with strangers. My father, who had once owned a business and prided himself on independence, now slept on a narrow cot behind a thin divider. Emily moved in with a friend and took a job at a coffee shop, posting vague, bitter messages online about betrayal and learning who your real family is. Daniel's fall was the most dramatic. After the clinic terminated him, the medical board's investigation dragged on, and while his license technically remained intact, the restrictions placed on it made him untouchable. No reputable practice would hire him. Someone recognized him stocking shelves at a pharmacy and shared it online, turning his humiliation into another headline. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt tired. 2 weeks after the video went viral, a thick envelope arrived by certified mail. The return address belonged to a law firm. My hands shook as I opened it, reading the threats of defamation, invasion of privacy, emotional distress. They demanded I take everything down and issue a public apology. For a few terrifying minutes, doubt crept back in. What if I'd gone too far? What if this ruined Lily's life somehow? I called a cousin who'd gone to law school, one of the few people still willing to speak to me. She read the letter and sighed. She told me it was mostly intimidation, that Daniel didn't want this evidence anywhere near a courtroom. It calmed me enough to breathe. I didn't remove anything. Eventually, the threats stopped. A month later, my mother sent a long handwritten letter shoved under my apartment door. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity and old habit won out. I read every page at the kitchen table while Lily slept. My mother wrote about sacrifice and suffering, about sleeping on cots and eating donated food, about my father's declining health. She listed every way they had fulfilled their duties as parents. She asked how I could let this happen over one mistake, over one moment. She never mentioned Lily, not once. No apology, no acknowledgement, just pain centered entirely on themselves. The final thread of hope I hadn't realized I was still carrying snapped. I unblocked my mother's number for one call. She answered immediately. Hopeful. I asked her why Lily wasn't mentioned. She hesitated, then said they were trying to move forward. She defended Daniel again, minimized what he'd done, said he hadn't meant it. When I reminded her about the video, about the nightmares, about therapy, she dismissed it with the same phrase she'd always used. Children are resilient. I hung up without yelling, blocked her number again, and cried for the first time since everything began. Not because I regretted my choice, but because I was grieving the family I had wanted but never truly had. The weeks that followed were harder than I expected. The adrenaline faded, and what remained was exhaustion. At work, my focus slipped. I made a serious error on a major audit, one that nearly cost the firm a key client. My supervisor called me into his office, his disappointment sharp and impersonal. He didn't care about my reasons. He slid a formal warning across the desk and told me to get it together. I signed it with shaking hands and cried in the bathroom afterward, the weight of everything pressing down at once. That night, I admitted to myself that I needed more support than I was getting. Lily's questions started slowly, almost casually. One evening at dinner, she asked when we were going to her grandmother's birthday party. I told her we weren't. She asked why. I tried to explain in the simplest terms that I could, that some places aren't safe, and my job was to keep her safe. She nodded, but the questions didn't stop. Why didn't her grandparents call anymore? Why did other kids' grandmas pick them up from school? Each question felt like a small cut. The hardest came when she told me she sometimes wished we could go back, even if her uncle was mean, because she missed her cousins and the parties. I pulled over that day and let her talk until she reached her own conclusion. When I asked if she wanted to see them again, she thought carefully and then said no. It hurt too much there. I held her hand the rest of the drive home. About 3 months after everything fell apart, a social worker knocked on my door. She explained politely that my parents had listed me as next of kin at the shelter, and that this was simply a courtesy notification. She wasn't asking me to help. She was just informing me. After she left, guilt flooded in, heavy and familiar. That old voice sounded like my mother, reminding me of obligations and sacrifice. I almost reached out, almost typed a message suggesting we talk. Then Lily whimpered in her sleep from the next room. Caught in another bad dream. I deleted the draft message, blocked the number again, and this time removed the contact entirely. Some doors can't be left cracked open. Life settled into a quieter rhythm after that. Therapy helped Lily slowly find her way back to herself. The nightmares became less frequent. Her laughter returned in bursts, tentative at first, then stronger. I leaned harder on the support group, made friends there. People who understood the strange mix of relief and grief that comes with cutting off family. We met for coffee, shared babysitting, sent late-night texts when guilt flared up. I learned that family could be built, not inherited. Then one afternoon, nearly a year after that Sunday, I ran into Daniel at a pharmacy across town. He stood behind the counter in a wrinkled uniform, his posture slumped, his face lined and tired. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He apologized, his voice cracking, told me he thought about Lily every day. I didn't engage. I paid for my purchase, took the receipt, and walked out. His regret, real or not, changed nothing. At home that evening, Lily was laughing with friends from school, the sound filling our small apartment. I watched her for a moment, that unguarded joy I'd been so afraid she'd lost forever, and felt something settle inside me. The damage had been real, the loss had been real, but so was the life we were building now, and for the first time, that felt like enough. In the months that followed, the world kept moving, even though a part of me still felt suspended in the aftermath of everything that had happened. Work became steadier again once I forced myself back into routine. I double-checked every report, stayed late when I needed to, and slowly rebuilt the confidence my supervisor had lost in me. I didn't explain my personal life anymore. I showed up, did my job, and went home. It wasn't passion driving me forward, just responsibility. Lily depended on me, and that was reason enough. At home, our lives grew quieter in ways I hadn't realized I needed. There were no more loud gatherings filled with people talking over one another. No tension humming beneath forced smiles. Our evenings were predictable. Homework at the kitchen table, simple dinners, bedtime stories, read twice because Lily liked to hear them again. She started inviting friends over, their laughter echoing through the apartment. And I watched her relearn how to trust her. Therapy continued twice a week for a while, then once. Dr. Martinez said Lily was making real progress. The hypervigilance faded. The way she startled at sudden movements softened. Some scars remained, but they no longer ruled her days. Despite that progress, questions about family kept surfacing, usually when I least expected them. One night over dinner, Lily casually asked when her grandmother's birthday was. My fork froze mid-air. I answered carefully, telling her the date, and she asked if we were going. When I said no, she frowned but didn't argue. A few weeks later, she asked why her grandparents didn't call her anymore. I told her the truth in words a child could understand. Sometimes adults make choices that hurt others, and when they don't fix those choices, we have to step away to stay safe. She accepted it in the way children do, absorbing it quietly and carrying it with her. The hardest moment came after school one afternoon when she got into the car unusually quiet. After a few minutes, she told me one of her classmates had brought cupcakes for her birthday, delivered by her grandmother. Lily stared out the window and said, almost casually, that everyone seemed to have grandparents except her. The words landed hard. I reminded her she had me, that she had friends and people who loved her. But even as I said it, I knew it didn't erase the absence. Some losses don't have replacements. They just exist. That night, after Lily went to bed, I cried alone in my room. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but the slow, aching kind that comes from letting go of something you've wanted your entire life. I cried for the child I'd been, the one who worked endlessly for scraps of approval. I cried for the idea of family holidays that would never look the way movies promised. And I cried for Lily, who had learned far too young that adults could fail you in irreversible ways. When the tears finally stopped, I felt wrung out but strangely lighter. Like grief had finally been given permission to breathe. As winter turned into spring, something unexpected happened. The guilt that had once screamed in my head softened into a distant murmur. It didn't vanish, but it no longer controlled me. I stopped checking my phone for messages that never came. I stopped wondering if today would be the day someone apologized. Instead, I focused on what was directly in front of me. Lily learned to ride her bike without training wheels. We celebrated with ice cream on the curb. I was invited to a coworker's small dinner party and realized, halfway through the evening, that I was actually enjoying myself. I was building a life without constantly bracing for disappointment. Every so often, attempts at contact still found their way to me through others. An aunt sent a long message about forgiveness and healing. A cousin suggested mediation. I didn't respond. I had learned that explaining myself only reopened wounds. People who understood didn't need justification. People who didn't never would. The silence I maintained wasn't anger anymore. It was protection. One afternoon, while cleaning, I found an old family photo buried in a drawer. It was from years ago, taken outside my parents' apartment. Everyone was arranged neatly. My parents at the center. Daniel standing proudly beside them. Emily leaning in with her practiced smile. I was on the edge of the frame, half cut off, my face only partially visible. I stared at the image longer than I meant to, noticing how even in that frozen moment I looked tired. Like I already knew I didn't belong where I stood. Lily wandered into the kitchen and asked who the people were. I told her they were just people from a long time ago. When she asked if I was sad, I surprised myself by answering honestly. I wasn't. I threw the photo away and felt nothing but relief. Not long after that, Lily asked me one night if I was happy. The question caught me off guard. She told me I seemed different now, lighter, especially compared to when we used to go to her grandparents' place. Children notice everything, even when you think you're hiding it. I told her the truth. I was happy. Happier than I'd been in a long time. She smiled and said she liked it being just us because it was quieter. Quieter in a good way. I hugged her tightly, realizing she had found peace in the same place I had. The final confrontation came when I least expected it. I was at a pharmacy picking up allergy medication for Lily when I looked up and saw Daniel behind the counter. He looked nothing like the man who used to command rooms. His shoulders were hunched, his face worn down by exhaustion and regret. For a moment, time stalled. He apologized, told me he was sorry, told me he hadn't meant it. I didn't engage. I paid, thanked him like any other employee, and walked out. His apology came too late and cost too little. Some things can't be undone by words. That evening, as Lily laughed in her room with friends, I realized how far we'd come. The fear that once ruled our home was gone. The tension I'd carried for decades had finally loosened its grip. Our life was smaller than the one my parents had imagined for me, but it was calmer, safer, and filled with genuine warmth. I no longer felt the need to prove my worth to anyone. I was enough for the one person who mattered most. By the time summer arrived, Lily's therapist officially discharged her. The nightmares had stopped. The flinching had faded. Dr. Martinez told me Lily was resilient. Yes, but also lucky to have a parent who chose her without hesitation. I carried those words with me, letting them settle where doubt once lived. I wasn't the villain my family painted me as. I was a mother who refused to negotiate her child's safety. Looking back, I understood something I hadn't before. Walking away wasn't the hardest part. Staying would have taught Lily that love comes with conditions and pain should be tolerated for the sake of appearances. Leaving taught her something else entirely. It taught her that she mattered. And that lesson, I knew, would shape her life far more than any family gathering ever could. By the time a full year had passed since that Sunday afternoon, the sharp edges of the memory had dulled, but the lesson it carved into me remained clear. Life didn't magically become easy. There were still bills, deadlines, bad days, and nights when exhaustion pressed so heavily on my chest that sleep felt impossible. But the chaos had changed. It no longer came from inside my own family. The silence in our home wasn't tense anymore. It was peaceful, predictable, safe. Lily continued to grow in ways that reminded me daily why every difficult choice had been worth it. She laughed freely again, loud and unrestrained. The kind of laughter that fills a room and lingers even after it fades. She made friends easily, invited them over, and our small apartment became a place where children felt comfortable and welcome. I watched her confidence return piece by piece. She spoke up when something bothered her. She told me when she was scared. She told me when she was happy. Trust, once cracked, had been carefully rebuilt. At work, things stabilized. After the warning Tom had given me, I forced myself to confront the fact that I couldn't compartmentalize grief forever. I asked for a temporary reduction in workload, something I'd never done before, and to my surprise, it was granted. I didn't share details. I didn't need to. I showed up consistently, regained my footing, and slowly rebuilt my professional reputation. The mistake that once felt like the beginning of the end became just that. A mistake, not a definition of who I was. Occasionally, reminders of my old life still surfaced. A message passed through a cousin saying my parents wanted to talk. An aunt suggesting forgiveness was the only path to peace. Emily sending a plea for help through someone else, promising she had changed. Each time I felt a brief tightening in my chest, followed by clarity. I didn't respond. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but because I had finally learned that access to my life was not a right. It was something earned through care, respect, and accountability. None of them had ever shown that to Lily. One evening, while washing dishes, Lily asked me a question that stopped me in my tracks. She wanted to know if families always stayed together. I dried my hands and sat down with her, choosing my words carefully. I told her that families are supposed to keep you safe and make you feel loved. But sometimes people don't know how to do that, even when they're related to you. When that happens, it's okay to step away. She listened quietly, then nodded as if that answer fit something she already understood. Children often know more than we give them credit for. There were moments when sadness still crept in unexpectedly. Holidays were the hardest. No crowded dinners, no loud arguments, no obligatory smiles. Just the two of us. The first Thanksgiving alone felt strange, almost empty. Until I realized Lily was relaxed in a way she never had been before. We cooked together, made a mess, laughed when things burned, and ate on the couch while watching a movie. There was no tension, no fear of saying the wrong thing. By the end of the night, I felt something close to joy. I thought often about the person I had been before all of this, the woman who believed endurance was the same as love, who thought being needed, even when it hurt, meant she mattered. Walking away forced me to confront how deeply that belief had been ingrained. I had confused obligation with connection. I had allowed myself to be diminished because it felt familiar. Breaking free from that pattern wasn't heroic or dramatic. It was quiet, lonely at times, but necessary. One afternoon, while waiting at Lily's school pickup line, I saw grandparents chatting excitedly, hugging their grandchildren, passing out snacks. For a brief moment, the old ache surfaced. I imagined what could have been if things were different. Then Lily climbed into the car, smiling, telling me excitedly about her day, and the ache faded. Grief doesn't disappear. It just learns its place. The last attempt at reconciliation came through my father. A short message, carefully worded, saying families aren't meant to be torn apart forever. No apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened. Just obligation wrapped in sentiment. I stared at the screen for a long time before deleting it. I didn't feel angry. I felt finished. Closure, I realized, doesn't always come from conversation. Sometimes it comes from deciding you no longer need answers. Not long after that, I ran into Daniel one final time, not face-to-face, but through rumor. Someone mentioned he had moved again, taken another low-paying job, still blaming everyone but himself. I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no pity, just distance. Whatever reckoning he was facing was his own. It was no longer tied to me or my daughter. Lily's life continued to expand. She joined a weekend art class, her confidence blossoming as she showed me her drawings. bright and full of color. She slept through the night without nightmares. She no longer flinched at raised voices in movies. Dr. Martinez had told me healing wasn't about erasing what happened, but about building enough safety afterward that the memory no longer controlled the present. Watching Lily thrive, I knew that safety had taken root. One quiet night, after Lily had fallen asleep, I stood in her doorway like I often did, watching her chest rise and fall. Her face was peaceful, unburdened. I thought about the promise I had made in the car that day, that no one would ever hurt her like that again. I had kept it, not by fighting endlessly, not by forcing apologies, but by choosing her over everything else, over approval, over tradition, over fear. I used to think strength meant endurance, staying, absorbing, smiling through pain. Now I understood that real strength is knowing when to leave, when to protect, when to say no even if your voice shakes. I had taught Lily that lesson, not with words, but with action. She would grow up knowing her safety was not negotiable, that love does not come with bruises or laughter at your pain. Our life wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was honest, it was calm, it was ours. And as I turned off the hallway light and closed Lily's door, I felt something settle deep inside me, a quiet certainty that I hadn't felt before. I didn't need validation from the family I lost. I had built something better, something real, and for the first time in my life, that was enough.